Open Dialogue here on Ahlebait TV. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host for tonight, and welcome to another episode. We are here discussing social issues, and we have another topic, which is actually something very interesting again regarding defamation of character within the community, as well as the sabotage and slander that happens. I know you might think that we understand in our faith that this is definitely not acceptable and how can this happen, but unfortunately it still does. So we have an expert with us tonight to talk about the characteristics of people who actually do these kinds of things, as well as the impact and the consequences of it, because it is serious. We use social media a lot, and that is one place that a lot of people are using to actually have this kind of things. And if they are not even aware that this is what's actually happening and this is how it comes across, we want to create that awareness in order to better ourselves. So without further ado, I would love to welcome my guest for tonight. We have Layla Naji. Salamu alaikum.
Thank you for having me back again.
Oh, I love having you, and I was really looking forward to this, and especially the topic. I know you're the best person for this. You have amazing sort of awareness, you have the knowledge, you have the wisdom and the experience. So I would love for you to introduce this topic as to why we have chosen this today and what is the impact as we will go through the stages, but more importantly, give it and sort of like a definition as to what it actually means when we talk about defamation of character.
Well, it really has a variety of definitions, and that's what makes it really tricky. Is one person might think that it's something very specific and they're not engaging in it, but really it could be any type of criticism about another person, whether it's something to do with their looks, their finances, their job, the way that they parent, their faith and how they practice it, their clothing, the way that they dress, everything from their lifestyle choices to conversations that they have, their social groups, people that they choose to hang out with. So anything that is critical and anything that that person would not necessarily be comfortable hearing from another person can fall into this idea of defamation or slander. Anything that ruins somebody's credibility one way or another definitely falls under this category. And I think the reason is it's extremely important to talk about this topic currently is that it used to be, it's always happened. It's kind of one of those, a tale as old as time, as it were. But in the age of the internet and in the age of social media, there is such a far reach to any negative comments, any kind of criticism, any kind of shining the light on somebody's flaws. It's once it's out there, it's always out there, and it has this sort of multiplying effect. And it's very difficult to recover from in many cases. And I think that's why it's something that we really need to address.
I think you've highlighted something very important. It is a very serious topic, and I think a lot of us may be not even understanding the seriousness of it. And I would like to talk more about the actual impact, or so to speak, the examples. You mentioned a few when it comes to social media, but a lot of people feel that it's my platform. I can speak how I want, and I can mention people, and I can say what I want, and I can jump on the bandwagon, even if someone else has put out something there which I can comment about. Now, what is the implication of this in a serious matter? Forget even religiously, because we will come into that later on. But people nowadays, they do feel that they have a right to give their opinion about another person, and they're not shying away from calling them out, putting their name across, and saying it on a huge space, and actually instead of addressing that person personally, or having that private conversation, because there is that option even on the platforms. And I've always found that if people can speak about me but have an opportunity to speak to me but choose not to, then what does that actually say about that person?
So I believe that all behavior is both functional and dysfunctional at the same time. So whatever we do, it serves a purpose for us one way or another. And I believe that first of all, people started with the idea thinking that they have this religious obligation or a moral obligation to call somebody out. They think they're giving advice, they think they're being helpful, but really, none of us are in a position to call anybody else on anything, because unless we are absolutely perfect human beings in every aspect of life, and I've yet to meet one of those, then we really have no right to be pointing the flashlight at somebody else's faults or shortcomings. But I think it started off where people would call each other on the phone or be together at the masjid, for example, or a social gathering, and it would start off with something like, well, I'm going to tell you something, but don't tell anyone. And we know how that goes. It starts off with one and it multiplies and it multiplies. And unfortunately, not only in our culture and our community, I believe it's a worldwide thing, but our reputation and our credibility is really something that impacts every area of our life. We know now, if you go and apply for a job, what do they ask you for? References from other people. If you're applying to study or get into graduate school, for example, if you are trying to look for a marital partner, what's the first thing people do is go around and ask about you. If you are a teenager or a child trying to make friends at school, if somebody says something about you, everybody else jumps on that bandwagon. So once this ball starts rolling of this negativity or this pointing fingers, it's really very difficult for the person who's the target to recover from it. And the purpose that it really serves for the person instigating it, as well as the people who join in, is that as long as we're pointing the finger at somebody else, I can feel a little bit safer that it's not going to get pointed back at me. So it's sort of this very counterproductive trying to protect yourself, but then throwing somebody else under the bus, having them suffer, having them deal with both the mental health effects, the effects in society of sort of losing credibility, losing friendships, being isolated and ostracized even. We live in this world where cancel culture has become such a common thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as anybody does anything that is viewed as undesirable, unacceptable, the idea is that we sort of remove that person, and instead of giving them an opportunity to make amends, giving them an opportunity to learn and do better, or to even tell their side of the story, it's much easier to scapegoat that person.
Absolutely, absolutely. I loved everything you've said then. It's really important. I do want to remind the viewers that this is a live call-in show. And if you do want to participate in the conversation with any comments, queries, please do so. I also want to welcome our Syed Razawi. Salaam alaikum. Welcome tonight.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for hosting.
You're very welcome. We are discussing defamation of character and how people even use religion as part of their duty to speak on a platform like even the internet, any sort of social media platform, to call out people, to speak about them without having the defense of the other, to even name them and then have others comment about somebody. And, this is very damaging for their reputation, for their future. It can impact their social setting. It can impact their future role as as potential spouse, for example. Just even having a character witness against them, it could be so detrimental. And I think people don't realize the impact of it. We are going to go further with Layla, but before we do, a lot of people argue, Syed, that this is my right. I am, practicing Amr bin Ma'ruf, and, I have a right to speak and say things as I would like, especially, when it comes to calling somebody out if they're not wearing the correct hijab or dress or having the same mannerism. What is your view and what is the actual guideline to this? Because as we know, it does cause mental health issues when people are unfairly judged on a platform that they cannot fight back, and you get people jumping on the bandwagon. And on top of that, they cannot defend themselves. And if they do, then you just get hundreds of other people, because obviously it's not their platform, who are going to be joining in just for that person's sake, to say, that's my friend, she said this about you, he said this about you, so it must be true. What is your thoughts on this, Syed?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Definitely, it's a subject that is very common in our society. The problem is very common in our society. And especially when I deal with the dispute cases, I end up getting accused or listening to many such accusations. Uh, there's a very delicate line. Uh, I, as a person who is dealing with the dispute cases, I have to listen to the both sides of the story, and this is my job. I have to listen. And but there are places and points that it is totally unnecessary to mention about somebody's past. Even there is a narration that, for example, if there is a divorced lady or divorced brother, and somebody comes to them and says that we want to marry your ex-partner and would like to know why you divorced her or him, and what is the reason for it, you are supposed to just say that it didn't work out for us. We were not suitable partners for each other. Then they might be a suitable partner for someone else. And we should avoid discussing their past unless there is something very serious. And if there is something serious, it would have been obvious and they wouldn't have come to you. Or if you think that may harm someone, then it becomes your obligation and duty to at least refer them to experts or refer them to someone else and say that, well, I don't know much. I couldn't make with him or her, and you go and ask someone else. And that's what Islam teaches. Islam says that live in peace and separate in peace from each other. Don't need to argue and fight and uh, throw the dirt on each other and belittle other person and try to prove yourself more than other person. If you can't be together, just separate peacefully, and that is the Islamic way of solving the problem.
Thank you, Sayed. That is very clear. I guess there's 2 points here that I've sort of taken away from it. Is the fact that also we can deal with things in private, which, there won't be any defamation of character. I think the point is that defamation of character happens when it is spread on a wide platform. But then certain people, they don't want to talk to you. Even friendships nowadays, when there's a dispute, they rather text message you. They don't give you a chance to speak back. They don't want to hear your side because they've already made their own minds up, and that's fine. But I find that if it was a genuine friendship and a true concern about the other person, you give them that opportunity to speak. And if you don't, that means that you're the one that doesn't want to hear and be open to the truth. And all you want to do is like accuse that person, or even worse, is to actually talk about them, to somebody else, or not just in private, but actually put it out there in a public space. And that's where the detrimental effects and impact happen. Now, Layla, knowing that you've done a lot of psychological studies, you're a professor, and you are based in the United States, I do appreciate your time. You're 8 hours behind us there in Los Angeles and California, and it's amazing to have you tonight. I just want to ask you, what is the mental implications of slander and defamation?
Okay, well, obviously, things have increased exponentially in the age of social media, because there's one thing if your friend is saying something and tells it to two of your other friends versus when somebody shares something on a platform and they have anything upwards of 1,000 or 10,000 followers or even more. Where can you even begin to tell your story or stand up for yourself at that level? And so people feel extremely defeated. And I really think there is no difference in defamation of character to harassment and bullying. anything that you put out there, the effects mentally are really the same. It definitely will lead to anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and even actual attempted suicides. I mean, unfortunately, we've heard multiple stories over the years in not only adults, but even very young children who have taken their lives because somebody has started a rumor at school or shared a picture of them or shared something that they don't want to be out there in the world, or perhaps something that they engaged in and now regret and want to forget and move on. But once it's out there, it's really impossible to gain credibility again or to really fight back as a single person. So really the effects in terms of mental health are as serious as leading to suicide, and that has happened multiple times. And at the very least, it will create a constant sense of anxiety and trauma in that person, to where it's very difficult for them to trust anybody again. It's very difficult for them to formulate new friendships and new relationships. And actually, if you hear something enough, even if it isn't true and inaccurate, you do tend to start to believe it and internalize it about yourself. Because if it's coming at you repeatedly, you even start to question your own reality, and you think, well, these are people that call themselves my friends or even my family. And let's be real, a lot of the time, this does start from family members. It's not necessarily from a stranger that you might be able to brush it off more easily because you think
Yes.
that person doesn't know who I really am. But when it's coming from your nearest and dearest, for whatever their motivation might be, you actually start to question your own reality, your own belief about yourself, and internalize the things that people are saying about you, and your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your ability to really even want to fight back is diminished, and you really become a broken person, and it's very, very difficult to recover from. And my understanding also, and obviously I always want to put it out there that I have no religious expertise, but as I was doing my research, my understanding from what I read is that in terms of what the Quran says and what Hadith says, is that people who engage in this behavior of trying to defame and discredit another person, it's so bad that even their own efforts towards Allah to be faithful, or anything they engage in terms of prayers and du'as, are not as accepted because they've engaged in this type of behavior, even if it's with the intention of helping someone to do better. And the flip side of it is, rather than encouraging someone to strengthen their faith, to maybe be more dedicated to their prayers, to maybe be more conservative with their hijab, it makes that person feel so defeated that I'm trying my best, but obviously I'm not doing it right. So actually we end up pushing people to give up altogether. A lot of girls will say, well, they told me I couldn't wear makeup, or they told me some of my hair was showing, or my jeans were too tight. I may as well just take it off altogether. What's the point? Or I'm trying to pray and somebody told me that you did this wrong and this invalidates your prayers. And so people give up, and actually we're pulling them away from Allah. We're pulling them away from trying to focus on their faith by being so hypercritical. So whether it's from a spiritual point of view or from a mental health point of view, we're really, really breaking people down and damaging their prospects and their ability to recover, be it spiritually or from a psychological perspective.
It's really, really amazing you say that, because we can always point fingers, regardless of family and friends, to say that, okay, they could be the ones that are actually engaging in this and they may not know better. But then I know there are some even mental health counselors who call themselves that, who actually engage in this, who are from the Muslim faith, who can openly call out people or jump on the bandwagon and say, yes, I know this about her and or him, and they are this way. So it's really, it could be anyone. And don't assume that just because that person is doing it is probably not knowledgeable, because I think it's not to do with the knowledge and awareness. It's really, like you said before, it's to do with their own ego. And even someone who is practicing sort of mental health to help others, but if they can do that, what does that say about their own character? So they need to be very careful as to who you're going to. Just because you have a title and a status does not make you that way. Watch their actions in that way. And I feel that if people want to solve problems, friendships and relationships, they need to have conversations with each other. It's really important to have conversations with each other, and not through just messages, not through a third or second party. And I guess that only happens when that person doesn't give them a chance. And like you said, it only means something, and it actually does have an effect if you actually value that person. And if the other person's not giving you a chance, then yes, it can really affect your mental state and health. And I think people need to really understand that this is more serious than what they think. Just by them saying one word, it could plant a seed to so many different people who never even thought of that in the first place. So we need to be much more aware that, our ibadah, our way of being in this life is that even if you have some critical analysis of somebody, the way in which you say it makes a huge difference, and how you say it. And it's not like you don't have a right to correct somebody, but it's how you correct somebody, and do it privately is much better than calling them out on a big platform, because it's detrimental, absolutely detrimental. And I've witnessed exactly what you've said, where people have been constantly criticized and put down for not practicing in a particular way, not being seen in a particular way, and they've completely gone the other direction. And then again, they criticize, say, well, if your iman is not that great and strong, then, it shouldn't matter. But it does matter. We're humans. Say it. When that is spoken about, where, our faith is then sort of like judged to say that, well, you should be able to take this kind of criticism if someone is trying to call you out, and that just shows that you're weak in your faith. What is your response to that?
I believe that we would
Sorry,
all do much
Layla.
better.
1 second. Sorry, I just asked to say it. I really apologize.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, there's one point. I mean, we should not be definitely judgmental. We should give the chance to the person to express their view, and once they have expressed their view, then we should decide later on. But the problem is, I mean, what I personally face when I'm dealing with the cases, I just pass the information of one side to other side, saying that this is what are the complaints about you from the other side, because I'm dealing with the case. Immediately they become very judgmental, and we, oh, you have made decision. I said, I have not made decision. I'm just conveying what are the reasons that your partner is deciding to leave you. But people seem to be judgmental, and they jump to conclusion very quickly. And this is why there are majority of the problems in our society are because of that. People jump to conclusion. I mean, husband
Yes.
husband is tired, comes home, and as soon as the wife says something, he jumps to conclusion and makes the decision. Oh, she's just a nagging wife. Oh, or the same thing happens with the wife. Husband comes home and starts picking on the mistakes or the problems in the house without even looking into the fact that she might have had a big difficult day and problems during the day, and that's why things have not happened the way he expected. Although it's not her duty, but still, if there are some expectations, we should give the benefit of doubt first. This is what Islam teaches us. Not only Islam, it's a rule of law and logic that everybody is innocent until proven. I mean, we cannot
Definitely.
we cannot immediately decide, oh, this person is this. I mean, we should not be judgmental, definitely.
You also raised again another important point, Syed, and that's why I'm continuing in my studies today with regards to understanding human mind and behavior. I am certainly not perfect, but I always get caught out as well for acting and being in a particular way. And without being given a chance to explain myself, people automatically assume, they judge, and most definitely they always think of it in a negative way. And that is all fine if you're given the same equal amount of space to actually explain yourself and talk. And you certainly can't do that by text message. You certainly can't do that just by, hearsay. You have to have decent conversations, because when you have decent conversations, then two adults have a much better understanding. And even when I'm coaching my clients, and when I feel that, especially when it comes to couples, and I even before them is speaking to each other, I make them repeat what the other person's saying in order for them to at least understand what's being said. And that is a technique. And, when it's in my own friendship groups as well, there's a lot of difficulty, because a lot of people will just have their own story. They pick on one thing and they will just run with it. They'll roll with it, and they just have an assumption because they've already made their own judgment without giving you a chance. So those people, unfortunately, do not have a place in your life, and you just have to let them be. However, Layla, when it comes to the mental health effects as well as coping with it, what would be your advice with someone who is going through this kind of defamation and slander? How would you sort of guide them alongside this, sort of experience?
If I may just take a couple of minutes to address something before I answer that question. I just
Absolutely.
wanted to go back and reference what you were saying about when people who have a big platform, or people who are therapists or work in mental health, do engage in this type of behavior. So people may not know that there are very clear ethical and legal guidelines for therapists about what they can and cannot say. And everything is supposed to stay confidential between a therapist and a client, with the exception of four things. And those four things are very similar to what the Syed said Islam requires to be disclosed. And those are things when somebody is a danger to themselves or other people, or there is some type of abuse or neglect going on. So it's really related to a safety issue. That is the only time that confidentiality should be broken. And unfortunately, just because somebody has credentials or qualifications or a lot of followers, or is known for giving many talks, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're behaving in an ethical way. And I think we have to take everything we hear with a pinch of salt, and sort of think that just because this person has a lot of experience, a lot of exposure, a lot of influence, we have to really stop and think if they are adhering to those ethical guidelines or not. And, it's our responsibility to judge somebody's credibility and ability to do their job in the same way that we would research a doctor and get multiple opinions, before we believe anything and proceed with a procedure or a treatment. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, when people have these very large public platforms on social media now, they are being glorified. It is becoming almost like a fan base where everything that they're saying is being taken blindly without criticism. And I just would like to remind everybody that all of us make mistakes, all of us are fallible, all of us have a moral compass that we have to remind ourselves to follow. And so when we see this behavior happening, there's nothing wrong with questioning it. And I think the thing that stops people is the backlash, because they think if I question it, then the spotlight is going to be turned to me and I'm going to become the target. But we really do need those people who are willing to stand up and speak up for what is true, defend what is wrong, and that's the only way that change is going to happen. So thank you for letting me touch on that aspect of it. But in terms of coping mechanisms, I think what's difficult in our culture and our community, being such a collectivistic culture, is we are constantly told to forgive and forget and rise above and be the bigger person, and to continue engaging with these people and keeping them in our lives. And sometimes we don't have a choice, especially if it is from family members or people who are very much a part of your life and you see frequently. Sometimes we don't have the luxury of disengaging with that person, or no longer spending time with them, or setting a boundary in that relationship. But I think we still have to attempt to do that. Maybe if you can't cut that toxic person out of your life, at least reduce the contact that you have. Or maybe don't divulge personal things about yourself. Keep the conversation on a very surface level so that you're not opening yourself up to more exposure. Definitely try to spend more time with people who are in your support system, who you know see you for really who you are, and you feel comfortable and safe around those people. And it's difficult, but I would say sometimes it's knowing when to stop fighting and just having an acceptance of the fact that what this person is doing is really nothing to do with me. You know, sometimes I always say, what other people think of me is actually none of my business. You know, that's what they think, that's what they choose to hold on to. And quite frankly, it says a lot more about them than it does about me.
Yes.
You know, and so I think other ways when you really feel like your mental health is starting to be affected is to seek counseling, to seek therapy. You know, that is a very safe environment where you will learn skills on how to strengthen your self-esteem, how to avoid engaging in that negative self-talk that's being encouraged by whatever is being said around you. So I would say, you know, don't engage. Maybe at a time, see if you are able to be given the opportunity to speak up for yourself. And it feels like that's not going to happen. Just stop engaging, spend your time with people who make you feel safe, with people who see the real you that you can really be yourself around. Get help and support from a coach or a therapist. And honestly, if it gets to the point where it's bad enough, there's nothing wrong with exploring medication and psychiatry as well. That's what it's there for. If we were suffering on a physical level, we would have no problem seeking medication for that. So I think, you know, depending on the severity of how you're being affected, there's nothing wrong with setting boundaries, cutting people out of your life that are constantly causing this negative energy and constantly spreading negative things about you, or at least minimize the contact and spend your time and your energy around safe people and people who are going to build you up, see you for who you are, and seek professional help when it's necessary.
Those are amazing sort of coping mechanisms and absolutely vital for us to actually address. It is important that we do realize the severity because, as you were speaking and mentioning, that people will actually come to a point where, especially now, when there are people that don't stop and they are called, you know, trolling. That's the new thing now. Unfortunately, they have several accounts or they're constantly at somebody's case where it is mainly on social media, where it's a constant attack, a constant, you know, negative criticism or any sort of like comment which is against the person. And to be honest, there are not very many people that can handle that as much as it is where you should not to do certain things by engaging or feeling in a particular way. I know for a fact that it takes a very, very strong, able character to actually ignore it, even if you're seeking the help. Because, as you've said, it has led people to take drastic actions against themselves because, in a way, they actually believe it or they lose that confidence and self esteem. So, it's a very, very serious issue. Also, if you want to criticize somebody, I think we need to understand, what is it for? Is it for your own ego to make you feel better? Or is it really to help that person? And honestly, when you have the right intention to speak about somebody, it comes across differently. And you can even hear it in your text message, in your, you know, message that you're putting out on any sort of, you know, comment section, even on a wide platform. But I find that it is the nastiness that comes with it, which is very obvious, that you just really want to bring someone down and call them out or not give them a chance and just jump again on certain issues which you know that person is only going to be feeling bad about themselves and break. So again, I just want to say that I really thank you for addressing all of these issues. But before we end, I want some final thoughts and words about this very serious topic, because we know that it has affected people drastically. And there are even mental health practitioners out there that can even be on the same sort of like side of being, you know, the perpetrators of this. So we need to call out that without naming names, but for them to be aware that, just, you know, because you have a certain status does not give you the right to speak about them, even if it's not your actual client, but you just being that kind of person to actually speak down at somebody. Are you there to really help them or add to the issues and add to the mental health problems that you so-called say that you're helping with? So firstly, Syed, would you like to give some lasting words before we end the show?
One of the aims of all prophets that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to this world and all the divine books is self-purification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say that I have sent them to teach you. He said, I have sent them to teach you how to purify yourself. Once we have purified ourselves by self-analysis, who we are, what we are doing, where we are going wrong, what we are doing right, how we can improve ourselves, then we can move towards education. So we need to do that in our society. Every single member of the society, from leaders, from the to the grassroots level, everybody has to work on their self-analysis and then work to improve themselves. And if you improve yourself, you will be able to improve your society and family and people around you.
Thank you so much. Those are really, really wise words. And finally, to you, Layla, your final thoughts.
I think what I would say is that we all hold an individual moral responsibility. And that can manifest itself in many different ways. Not all of us are strong enough and brave enough to stand up and call somebody out and say, I won't hear what you're saying, I won't engage in this conversation. But you don't necessarily have to do it vocally, but don't leave a comment, don't reply to a message, change the subject in a conversation, walk away and, distract yourself with something else. Because when we don't, we really are adding fuel to the fire, and then we do become responsible in one way or another. So I think even if you're not somebody who feels that they can stand up and speak out and take that stance, there are also ways to diffuse the situation by not engaging, by not liking that person's comments, by not adding your own comments, by not saying, I also heard this, to try and minimize the fallout. And the other thing that I would say is for people who genuinely do want to help another person, I think nobody really does better at being criticized. But what we do is, if I come to you and I share what I'm struggling with and what I would like to improve about myself and be vulnerable that way, then it's much more likely than that person will share what they're struggling with, and we can be a support system for each other and grow in that safe environment. So we all have things that we can improve on, and rather than pointing fingers, let's show our vulnerabilities, let's be honest about what we would like to improve within our own selves, and be that support system and team for each other, and hopefully that way we will all benefit.
Thank you. That was absolutely beautiful. And what a wonderful way to end this program. Inshallah, I wish you well. Thank you so much, Syed, for your insights. Thank you so much, Layla, all the way from the United States, giving your time again. And I hope to collaborate with you again soon, because I know you have so much more to give and I can't wait for that. Thank you so much for watching. And inshallah, we've only highlighted this in order to give more information to better ourselves, because it does have an impact and it does have a negative effect if we do talk in this manner.